Good morning, everyone. You're listening to Turtle Island News with Tracey Kennedy. We are live on Revolution Radio Studio A, TurtleIslandNews.info, Wolf Spirit Radio, and, of course, the Awake Radio Group. Hey, everybody. I hope you're doing well. I started off my morning today with a series of emails telling me about the horrors that are ensuing as we speak, and the dead animals washing up on shore, the birds falling from the sky, and the asteroid army. Do you know that there's people alive right now that don't care about any of this, that are actually just happy? I want to start off with this today. One of my favorite poets, Khalil Gibran. Your reason and your passion are your rudder and sails of your seafaring soul. If either your sails or your rudder be broken, you can but toss and drift, or else be held at a standstill in mid-seas. For reason, ruling alone, is a force confining, and passion unattended is a flame that burns its own destruction. I would like to give you a caveat on that. It is passion that will save us. How many people are going through their lives right now with no passion? And all of the news that we tell, which is horrific. And I can't be surprised by it because I spent a lot of time horrifying you, of course. Know that atoms understand language, because you are not just your brain. If you were, mind control programming has already won. The idea that somewhere in all the stacked up universes there might be a little corner that isn't made out of matter or energy, that it's truly independent of and different from subatomic particles. This idea confounds people, as if it might mean the end of existence. It might mean a return to the old myths and fairy tales of horrific priest classes who ruled us. It might mean everything science knows will vanish in a puff of smoke, that all illusions will just dissolve because they are not true. But what if it doesn't mean any of those things? What if it means that brutal power and domination could actually really, truly die out? What if it means that there is an adventure waiting for all of us beyond any and all pictures of this reality? Do atoms understand language? And why even ask such a question? Because it goes to the heart of the slow motion car crash that conventional physics has been experiencing for quite some time. Question also puts philosophical materialism into a massive dither from what it can't hope to recover from. Conventional physics says that the universe is made of particles, atoms, quarks, wavicles or something. The universe includes your human brain. Here's a sentence. The Roman Empire collapsed, ushering in a dark age and a time of unprecedented chaos. Now forget the truth or the falsity of that sentence. It's not an issue. What is at issue is the meaning of the sentence that you're hearing right now. Do you understand it? Do you understand its meaning? And of course you do, and so do I. But you see, your brain is made up of particles that physicists would say have no comprehension of language. None. Zip. Zero. These particles make up rocks and chairs and toothbrushes and asteroids and suns and brains. Same particles. They have no understanding of sentences or paragraphs or books. No understanding of meaning as expressed in language. So, you might ask, understanding of language must come from somewhere else then. How can it come from your brain if the brain is entirely composed of atoms? Hello, Adam. It rained today. It rained yesterday. Tomorrow could be sunny. The temperature will reach 70. Do you understand what I'm saying now? Quiet. Silence. Hello, Adam. I find the metaphysics of Kant impenetrable. How about you? No answer. Of course, physicists will dodge and tap dance and often diverting explanations of all these things. We're just beginning to understand the mysteries of the brain. We're making enormous strides. And this one is my favorite. Humans are conscious and understanding meaning and language. We know that. The only place this understanding could possibly come from is the brain. Therefore, the brain is conscious. Again, that's circular reasoning. It means you must assume what you're claiming to be true to prove it. It's one of the first and best fallacies a student learns about when he's studying logic, if anyone studies logic anymore. Some experts will make this assertion. There is no such thing as consciousness or understanding. They're delusions. So it's quite all right for the brain to be comprised of non-conscious atoms. In other words, you and I, sharing words and sentences, are completely deluded into thinking we could possibly understand them. We don't. We're just machines made of atoms. And if you buy that argument, I'm looking for investors in my new Thorazine cookie company. No. I'm afraid that conscious understanding of language is quite real. And that understanding, that knowing, is right here and right now, isn't emanating from your brain. Can't be emanating from the brain. Where it comes from, well, all sorts of opinions can be offered, of course. But one thing is clear. The whole universe is comprised of atoms. If atoms have no conscious understanding, then consciousness and understanding come from somewhere else, a non-atom place. For example, from you. And by you, I mean a non-material being, unmeasurable, unanalyzable. No big deal. Just a difference between a squashed, collapsed view of existence and an infinite view. A statement from a 1937 Nobel laureate in philosophy and medicine said, "In my search for the secret of life, I ended up with atoms and electrons, which have no life at all. Somewhere along the line, life has run out through my fingers. In my old age, I am now retracing my steps. how many other scientists would admit they too have come to the same crossroad? The deeper they probe, the further they find themselves away from what life is. How many of them would say, for the past 50 years, I've been quite sure of everything, that everything is made out of something? You know what I mean? Everything is made out of atoms and electrons and quarks and so on. But these little particles don't understand anything. They just move through space. Something non-material must possess the quality of being able to understand meaning. And that upsets all of them. How many scientists would just say that? I don't understand this and I'm a little bit upset about it. And again, why does this matter? Because matter is what matters to me today. And there's only one reason. There's an enormous amount of mind control research occurring all over the world. There's a new supercomputer who they describe as conscious, sentient. There is a mass of supercomputers called the Kraken that is run by the puppet who they say is intuitive. In Japan right now, mostly because those people have sex apparently, but no babies. There is an artificial womb. This research is all based on the premise that when it comes to humans, there is no one home. That there is just a brain and just a body, and that the functions of the brain can be manipulated and carved up and reduced in order to make a human machine function normally. No problem. No consciousness. No guilt. It's just tinkering with the apparatus. Welcome to the century of the brain. Welcome to psychopathic materialism taken to its obvious conclusion. Official insanity. But there is another power. In recent years, the process of restorative justice has been used more and more frequently as a way of dealing with crime. As a part of the process, offenders are brought face to face with the victims of their crimes to hear how they have suffered as a result. The aim of this encounter is to bring healing to the victim and the offender. The victim transcends their rage with some understanding and forgiveness towards the offender. The offender empathizes with the victim, becoming aware of the real meaning of their crime. This process changes lives. Victims feel free of the weight of hatred and are able to move on. Offenders have a wider sense of perspective and are less likely to reoffend. Sometimes offenders don't meet their specific victims. It's just the victims of similar crimes. But this still leads to a new awareness and new patterns of behavior immediately. This highlights the amazing power of empathy. To a large extent, all crime, all cruelty are the result of the lack of empathy. Your brain and not your heart. Your thought and not your passion. Your wants and your needs overcoming everything else. It's a lack of empathy which makes someone capable of attacking or oppressing other people. Greed, theft, A lack of empathy for another tribe or country makes warfare and conflict possible. A lack of empathy towards another ethnic group or a social class or a caste makes oppression and inequality possible. None of this that's happening on this planet could happen if we embraced our empathetic natures. So what is it? This empathy. That ability to feel another person, to identify with them, to feel what they're feeling, sense what they're experiencing. It's sometimes seen as the ability to read other people's emotions, the ability to imagine what they're feeling by putting yourself in their shoes. So empathy is seen as a cognitive ability along the same lines as ability to imagine future scenarios or solve problems based on previous experience. But in my view, empathy is more than this. It's the ability to make a psychic and emotional connection with another person, to actually enter into their real soul space, not mind space. When we look at ourselves and our bodies, which we are still told are made up of these little particles that don't think, they admit in little tiny pieces that must kill them, that our senses are far more evolved and involved, that our eyes just don't see, they feel, that our hands don't just touch, they absorb, that our skin absorbs information around us, that each of our organs or our archons, who hate us because we have not controlled these things, are each different way stations along the passions of our body. When we experience real empathy or compassion, our identity actually merges with another person's. It's not just sex I'm talking about here. The separateness between you and the other person disappears. Your self-boundary melts away. So in that sense, to an extent, you become them. If you experience this state of connection with another person, then it's impossible to treat them badly, even unintentionally. You recoil from their experience of suffering in the same way that you recoil from your own suffering. In fact, you feel a strong desire to relieve their suffering and aid in their development. Empathy has powerful psychological benefits for us too. It may be the food that we actually eat, the nourishment that we actually desire. And research shows that people who are more empathetic feel more satisfied with their lives, have better relationships. Some scientists used to believe that human beings are naturally selfish, separated, cruel. More and more research is showing that empathy, not selfishness, is what is truly hardwired into us, and they've had to fight every piece of our nature to make us become so cruel. Animals often show empathy towards one another, even members of different species. And this manifests in random acts of kindness. Animals often partner up with members of unrelated species. There are even instances of an animal from one species adopting those of another. And within their own species, animals often share food to make sure the weaker members of the group are fed, even if they have to sacrifice their own food. And we are told men and women are completely different in this respect. So are women truly more empathetic? Studies suggest women generally are more empathetic than men. For example, studies have shown women are significantly better at reading people's emotions purely from looking at their eyes. Other researchers have shown that women's friendships tend to be based on mutual help, problem sharing, whereas men develop friendships based on interests, sports, hobbies. This is not true. Men and women have shown that they have different styles, even of speech. The women's conversations are usually longer because of their use of more back channel support, like nodding and smiling and gestures. If they disagree, they tend to express their opinion indirectly rather than making a statement, helping to avoid a confrontation. Other hand, men seem more blunt and opinionated. They use imperatives and tend to talk over more. Men spend more time using language to demonstrate their knowledge and skill and status, which makes sense. After all, the vast majority of man's inhumanity throughout history has been from men. Men who have been taught to be like this. And almost all wars have been orchestrated and fought by men. Most social oppression has been inflicted by high-status men, seeking to protect and increase their power and their wealth. Also makes sense in terms of roles, parenting. Surely, nurture roles encourages empathy because of the need of a strong emotional attachment and connection to the child. At the very least, you could say this emotional connection would be made more difficult if they lose the ability to empathize. But I am here to tell you, I was raised almost entirely by men and felt no loss of just being around men. Loved, cherished, and thus the spoiled woman that you hear today. We've heard stories. There was this one I thought was just so cute, this 150-year-old tortoise male who ended up bonding with an infant, hippopotamus? Rhino? A rhino, I think. Wonderful father. I had a male cat, Raja, who passed away, and got a new kitten. Raja was the father, yes, but was the mother. Had no problem taking care of that baby. Empathy is not what we're told, and we're not dissing the boys today. I'm not having it, because I have seen as much love from men as I have felt hate from women, for no other reason that they could. There is no sex when it comes to empathy and love and nurturing and caring. We may express it in different ways because we are trained to express these things in different ways. Many tribal people worldwide respect nature because they sense it's alive, because they feel a connection to it. They sense that all natural things, not just plants, not just animals, but stones, the entire earth herself, are not just objects, but beings who are part of the same web, if you like, of creation as them. They emphasize with plants and animals in the earth, so are reluctant to damage or destroy them. A great Native American philosopher, Luther Standing Bear, wrote for the Lakota Indians, "Kinship with all creatures of the earth, sky and water, was real, an active principle. In the animal and bird world, there existed a brotherly feeling that kept the Lakota safe amongst them. As a result," wrote Luther Standing Bear, anticipating modern animal rights movement, "the animals had rights. The right of a man's protection, the right to live, the right to multiply, the right to freedom, and the right to man's indebtedness. And in recognition of these rights, the Lakota never enslaved an animal and spared all life that was not needed for food and clothing. This attitude brought a sense of responsibility. Many peoples see this, still see this, saw it, see it, themselves as the caretakers of nature, with a responsibility to preserve the harmony. So when the towers were built outside ourselves, and we suddenly, worldwide, stopped speaking and knowing each other's language, this is why I said harmony, the Mount Hermain thing. What we lost was our ability to understand these things easily. And a group of controllers, which we will go into yet again, took that over and made us forget what we are. As Chief Edward Moody of the Naxalt Nation says, we must protect the forest for our children, grandchildren, and children yet to be. We must protect the forest for those who can't speak for themselves, such as the birds and the animals and the fish and the trees. To a large extent, our environmental destruction is just one manifestation of our lack of empathy for the nature, for each other, and for the earth. Our strongly developed egos means that we experience a sense of otherness to everything, that we can't sense aliveness and don't feel qualms about exploiting or abusing because of that. There is always an other, and the other is always bad. But just as things have fallen apart, by the same means we could restore them. Lack of empathy makes cruelty and oppression possible. The presence of empathy heals this conflict. The wider empathy stretches from the victims to the offenders, from one ethnic group to another, from one nation to another, religion to religion, the less brutal, the more harmonious a place the world will become. Perhaps most importantly, as restorative justice shows, to some degree, empathy can be nurtured. When people are brought together in a neutral context with an open, trusting attitude, empathy naturally establishes itself. Distinctions of color and religion and other superficial identity badges just fall away, as does the sense of grief and rage from past events. Same could be said of nature too, When human beings spend time in natural surroundings, relaxing into its stillness and its space, a natural bond establishes itself. And this bond, which is truly our nature. Empathy shows the context of separateness is an illusion. Empathy is simply an experience of our true connectedness, the exchange of feeling through a channel of something shared, which unites not just all human beings, but all living and non-living things. We have just scratched the surface of what is sentient. Look into someone else's eyes for a moment and tell me you do not feel something. You look into someone's eyes long enough, you will weep. Scientists tremble. From the asteroid army that's hurling now towards Earth, that is blowing up our skies almost daily now. A report that I read to you back in early January talked about giant asteroids that appear to have intelligent trajectory, not unlike a military formation, comprised of 3 waves, 43 of them flying to Earth. February the 15th. February 25th was a big day for them. Things were freaking exploding everywhere. It raised concerns of scientists that these giant asteroids appear to kind of slightly alter their orbit at the beginning of January. Similar to that long period comet, I think Comet Lovejoy that we've talked about several times, which brightened to such an extent that it was visible to the naked eye. Now it approached its rendezvous with the celestial equator from the south, the 9th of January. Of intermediate effects, Lovejoy and all of these giant asteroids altering their course in 1 week simultaneously was a sudden opening in the sun's south pole of a massive coronal hole. At the exact same time, the equally massive sunspot erupted that had beta gamma delta magnet field that harbors energy for X-class flares. That just happened again. Western scientists keeping citizens' attention focused on the potential of these things, ending life as we know it, of course, and the plasma electrical discharge happening between the sun and Mars that happened several times already, but started back pumping in October just past. A threat with this asteroid army, their words, not mine, and catastrophic events like the North American magnetic anomaly that was first reported June 13th of 2 years ago, that within 48 hours of their orbital acceleration began to show a series of stress, like the pumping volcanoes and the earthquakes that are happening to us. It's interesting to note, that President Obama's December 17th lifting the restrictions and sanctions of Cuba was directly related to 5,000 military troops under the command of the Emergency Situations Ministry, funny name, were rushed to the Caribbean in July after Alaska had been hit with a rare 6.0 earthquake, supersonic, fast-moving, deep. Every night now, we hear of supposed rockets exploding in the sky. I say supposed because sometimes they don't look like rockets, really. And rockets from where? The moon. Rockets from Mars. One million Ukraine soldiers flee to Russia after thousands died in one battle. The world is in shock after Obama abandons hundreds of U.S. troops in the Ukraine. U.S. newsman Brian Williams destroyed, 3 others killed recently. Catastrophic events on this world. Battles raging. All of these things. And this strange little report. Prepare to defend the earth. The fallen angels have returned. Seriously, that's a frickin' report now. They're just going to say that. It is extraordinary. From Military Scientific Committee of the Armed Forces, MSC, on the just completed trials of ALMA's anti-high-energy laser-directed weapon system project by the 27th Central Research Institute, states that their immediate disbursement to the federal allies of China, India, Brazil is needed to defend the planet against, drumroll please, interdimensional entities who are about to recapture the earth. Because you can just say that now. Now, this report that there are many references of interdimensional entities contained in it that date back to the Great Patriotic War, World War II apparently, when the Soviet intelligence services confirmed German Nazi regimes had a communication link that could be described as fallen angels, demons, if you will. That our planet's oldest written records refer to as the gods. This report explains around 6,000 years ago, we kicked their little butts off our planet. It was called the Great Overturning, that nearly froze millions of woolly mammoths in Siberia, destroyed vast city-states known as Atlantis, which we will go into next week. And all the events that I've been telling you of all the religions and all the stories and all the people of the Great Flood. The epics that we've spoken of. One of the two epics that we've kept through all these things. The Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Details: ships, Vimana, airspace, It was supposed to be global and interstellar. The stories of the Nazi armies. The stories of the swastika, which is just the galactic center or the arms of the spiral. To me, this is not a big deal. It is the medicine wheel. It is the same thing. It's why we put that sign everywhere. And we have talked about these events occurring and reoccurring. Now, during the interval, since my last field report, the evolution of the human species continues to gain momentum, despite the orchestrated effects to stall and prevent such progress. I wish I could cite mass consciousness awakenings as the reason of this evolutionary momentum, but cannot. As such, is not in evidence at this time, despite the current trend. As expected, Earth's population, for the most part, remains unaware of and uninterested in the evolutionary process now unfolding around us. The kinds of changes stemming from the great shift of the ages, the great harvesting of souls, which it has been called, are not widely understood throughout the population, resulting in rampant spiritual confusion. The awakening now coursing through the Earth's population is primarily that they are waking up to the reality of their slavery at the hands of a few. Power. Elite. This generates so much fearful confusion that a vast spiritual awakening is completely missed by the majority. Mass cognitive dissonance is being generated and maintained by the Perception Management Bureau of the power elite. Like Chinese nesting dolls, the truth is concealed by layer upon layer of deception and misdirection. But despite this, the oppressive efforts deployed to prevent this process is underway. A surge in awakenings. It grows, slowly perhaps. It seems to this observer that in the face of ever-escalating horrors perpetuated by this power elite, the reaction by the majority of humans is silent, and it's still acceptance. All of the creatures on the earth, of all of them, only the humans fail to react to imminent danger. The greater the danger, the less attention is paid. If it will magically go away as if totally ignored, close your eyes really tight and it will just stop. Evidently, this tactic is taught in childhood as hiding under the blanket whenever frightened. Despite the grip of this power, cabal, if you like, getting tighter with each generation, the Earth's humans still seem to believe the promises. If you just get the right guy in, that things will improve. To me, this does not compute. An excellent example of this. Recent events where 3 police officers were filmed executing a man for throwing stones in Pasco, Washington, USA. There will be no cries of indignant outrage or civilian protest because the penalty for that is the same as for throwing rocks. The population so pacified with poison GMO mandated vaccine, aerosol chemtrailing, fluoridated water, sprayed viruses, transmuted sounds, audio frequencies, but no matter how fragrant the offense to human dignity, all is silently accepted, lest they be noticed. The human herd has been and will continue to be controlled according to the plan till the time of culling. Even now, the vast majority of humans believe the perpetrators of all of these horrors are themselves human. After what I've witnessed during my mission, I must conclude that denial is not just a river. It is the most powerful of all human emotions, right after fear. It's magnetic. It is suffocating. And this, of course, is exploited. This basic human tendency for denial, because we have been trained this way. It makes us easier to control over an expanding population of slaves who fight to be the better slave and more worthy of the table scraps thrown in front of them. From subliminal messages to forbidden archaeology, the experts at Perception Management Bureau, which is a real thing, by the way, leave nothing to chance. The reason that truth is often symbolized as a sword is because you need a sword to cut through the forest of lies, defending and protecting the truth. Like a horse with blinders, Earth's population sees only which the minders wish them to see, because the very best slaves believe themselves to be free. The advent of the worldwide internet and search engines gave the average person the power to learn virtually anything they wished. No worries. The minders flooded the thing with pornography and pictures of kitties. The internet allows for endless truths and seems to encourage only the worst kinds of truths and the worst traits of humanity. The population seems willing to believe that this group are guilty of many hideous crimes, but don't seem to want accountability, despite the fact that the minders have drip-fed the idea of evil aliens taking over the world to everything you look on TV in modern culture. Most choose to ridicule that idea, then risk humiliation in the eyes of their peers. Another masterful piece of programming is making certain that everyone who rants about anything cruel and strange or different, these beings anyway, calling the shots on Earth is labeled as a fool to be ignored. Yet some of them fill stadiums with seekers. The worship of ignorance has arisen to be a powerful political catalyst for separation rather than unity at this crucial time of planet slaughter. When science and facts indicate realities too uncomfortable for some, they stand upon their denial of same, as if the denial itself had weight or merit of some kind. Schoolyard antics belong in the schoolyard, not on the world stage. Yes, whether it's called global warming or climate change, it is a reality and it is a fact. Yes, the very same people who cause this dire reality also found ways of profiting from the denial of its existence as the people of New England states what they think of climate change after a month of snowfall. Something else the population ignores. Even the power elite's facade crumbles before their eyes, none so blind. The planet? As for the Earth herself, her current status is that of a pristine world being terraformed into a raging, I'm going to bleep the word I was about to use out, of toxic death and atomic mutation. Since humans first took to the seas, they've been using them as garbage. Such degradation. Factor in all the ships sunk in all the wars, with all their stores of bunkered oil sinking to the sea. You're listening to Turtle Island News with Tracey Kennedy, and I will be right back. Welcome back, everyone. You are listening to Tracey Kennedy live, Turtle Island News, standing on the green shield of Pakistan, experiencing the oil apocalypse right now, owned by China. If we just factor in the mega disasters of Katrina and the BP oil Mageddon, the infamous hurricane that took out the government disease test laboratory, and a number of toxic dumps, all flowing into the Gulf right now. Add in the oil linking from many hundreds of abandoned offshore oil rigs in the Gulf. Add the millions of gallons of BP oil spilled. And then add the classified amount of Corexit spilled into the ocean on top of the oil, which, rather than dissipate the oil, let it sink to the bottom instead, which they just found and were surprised to find oil there. The Gulf is dead. And what killed it is being carried around the planet by prevailing ocean currents. As if to illustrate my earlier observations on the failure of the human race to react to imminent danger, I have only to say the word Fukushima. Approaching the 4th anniversary of the nuclear plant failure and meltdown, the Japanese government continues to do nothing to prevent the continuing expulsion of radiation into the ocean and into the atmosphere. The world media continues to ignore and censor Fukushima news, but the Pacific Ocean is dying faster than the news of it can be covered up. Just recently, along the entire California coastline, hundreds, if not thousands, of young sea lion pups came ashore, as if escaping from the ocean. To an individual, these hundreds of pups were suffering from starvation and kinds of skin lesions seen only in radiation poisoning. Their mothers all died because the Pacific food chain has collapsed with the demise of the bait fish populations. They can't feed their starving young. Tragedy seems too small a word for this. How about ELE? Extinction level event. Yes, much more like it. The collapse of the Pacific food chain is a precursor event to the ultimate, inevitable, unstoppable irradiation of the human food chain as well. It's already in the grass and in the cow's milk. Western coast of North America being bombarded daily by increasing levels of Fukushima radiation from both atmospheric and oceanic plumes. Still, the human population continues to eat those fish, oblivious to the genetic damage to themselves and their progeny. For those of us still doing the do. There's no mainstream news coverage on the growing disaster that is Fukushima, just sleazy glow jobs from the media, hoarse, but radiation dissipating in seawater magically. There is no technology to correct the stupidity of building nuclear plants on fault lines near an ocean like Fukushima, Southern California. Only foresight can prevent such disasters. Unfortunately, it is seldom used by these humans on this earth. Ignorance is bliss until it isn't. Spent fuel rods at Fukushima remain perilously perched 40 feet in the air, much like an executioner's blade, but some of the rods are already sinking lower and lower. Another sufficiently powerful earthquake in that region easily could bring those decaying buildings crashing down when, not if, that happens. The engineered tragedy will be greatly amplified, the results devastating. As if planet Earth isn't besieged enough with everything else, the local star, Sol, has been of late undecidedly unstable. Solar flares, coronal ejections, more of a threat to Earth's passengers than to Gaia herself, as she might, as much as she might enjoy a refreshing cleanse. Such would decimate any chance for some technological solution to Fukushima. If technology was destroyed by solar activity or, said asteroid invasion, it might well be the death toll for life on Earth. But as one by one, every nuclear plant is slowly leaking, self-destruct without human oversight. Still, the majority of humans behave as if they do not see the connection between themselves and the Earth. So the plan, broader strokes of uplifting project, do seem to be working according to plan. Just as previous waves of Starseed volunteers have succeeded in getting activation codes and key concepts uploaded into modern culture, specifically, population has responded remarkably well to the 1111 recall code. Although most do not fully understand it, they understand its importance to them on a subconscious level. Moreover, this seems amplified somewhat by the Aquarian shift itself. The higher, more refined Aquarian energy is powerful enough to awaken the spirit, even as the planetary crisis awakens the ego. The message of the uplift plan is showing up in cultural medias and popular lore, just as the subliminal impacts and predictive programming of the minders is. All across cyberspace, these polar opposite concepts compete for true believers on nearly every level. Naturally, the waters get pretty muddy since the power elite play their own rules, which seems to be no rules at all, for them anyway. While it is encouraging to see people responding to the higher energy levels, waiting for them to reach a critical mass and change things becomes nerve-wracking. It's almost as if we're genetically engineered to not raise up in revolt and conditioned to accept a beatdown if we do protest en masse. Humans are fond of saying it's a numbers game, and they might do well to say it more often because the current conflict on Earth, we have the numbers to have things our way. The trouble is, we were tricked and our power stolen away from us. And as long as we don't ask for it back, nothing will change except for getting worse. This observer thinks that everyone knows that, but they're all still waiting for someone else to step up first. Would humanity take things more seriously upon the revelation that malevolent beings from Orion's neighborhood have infested the ranks of the power elite? Might slowly, gradual terraforming of the earth make more sense with such acknowledgement? Is there an accident that our cities have less oxygen? Humans need more oxygen. What, my loves, does not? What would the masses say if they knew the darkly named Solar Warden program, which is real, was created by Americans back in the 80s? I wonder. Instead of cooperating together to reveal the Archon threat, a few researchers engage with petty, ego-driven bickering about who owns a word and what that word means. Again, schoolyard politics. Humanity is a species, peaceful ideas, and violent history. A species traversely a cusp from spiritual childhood to spiritual adolescence, which perhaps explains why we still think violence solves a problem. True spiritual maturity eludes us. Galactic history is full of examples of sentient technology and species failing to survive the same transitional period that humanity is now making. Well, a great many are indeed having a full spiritual awakening in these chaotic times. For a shocking number, it's all too much for them. Self-termina. This is disturbing. The raw statistics, even more so. Participants, regarding the wave of uplift volunteers, the bad news is that things are much worse here than previous, and almost certainly because of it, some of our group may not become activated or even survive childhood. It's a battleground down here. I suspect others who are activated and survived childhood fell victim to violence of one kind or another along the way. For the rest of us still here and functioning through the toil, it does seek to wear us down. We seem to readily recognize one another down here. I think through a common resonance, an energy that we can still feel, and such meetings tend to bolster our commitment to the cause. Some of us may well have given up by now, were it not for the messages we receive from strangers conveying gratitude for our efforts. People everywhere are seeing a great shining lie crumble and fall apart. Nothing lasts forever. The blood of the power elite in the water. And this gives the population hope. Unfortunately, hope itself is insufficient to the task. Humanity needs to support their hopes for the future with positive, life-affirming action in the immediate now. Without action, all hope in the world is but a snack for the insatiable appetite of greed and domination and cruelty. Humanity's hopes taste just as sweet as its dreams and best intentions. I continue to work on maintaining a high vibration towards culmination. It becomes more difficult, at times painful, to witness the things currently happening here on Earth. It's all left me feeling detached now from the human drama with all its wars and terrorism and intolerance and everyday hateful violence. The overseers make sure that humanity stays focused, lower chakras, concerned with ego survival and sexuality with no passion, just bumping and grinding and feeling nothing. They use clever semantics to twist the truth beyond recognition and set us one against the other. I think I've come to the point of peace with it all, though. Understanding that my understanding isn't a requirement, just my commitment, just my, and I hate to use the word, conviction here. It has been observed that the minders and the powers who control them are more vulnerable to being overthrown now than any time in the past because of the spiritual rebirth at the shift of the ages. This is the reason for all the wars, the beheadings, the general pandemonium on Earth. A frantic last-ditch effort to stay in control and keep the population fearful and removed from the equation. If only humanity understood how exposed and vulnerable the overseers are this moment of time, you would laugh. There's so few of them. People would find the concept of the film series The Matrix so credible that they've adopted the term in modern society. Will they find the same concept any less credible with aliens in charge instead of computers who are now sentient? By the way, that's what Windows 8 is all about. It's an 8. It's a DNA code, non-stopping, non-looping. Uplift operatives continue to surprise the world with their boldness, effectiveness even. In times ahead, when one of us doing a game-changing act, they'll no doubt call it pulling a Snowden. Individuals are doing courageous things every day, pushing back against the insanity. It just never makes the newscast. It would only take a dozen or so like Snowden to bring the overseers down with one of their own tactics, death by 1,000 cuts. Anyone who doubts this has never spent a night in a tent with a hungry mosquito. The sound alone can make you crazy. The uplift specialists, the indigo children, the crystal children are already carrying out their specific parts of the mission and have gained recognition as leaders and way showers of the fifth sun. They are taking the knowledge of living spiritually, embodying it in a way they live on the planet, setting an example of a better way for all. Humans have to see something before they follow it. And they are seeing those who shall point into the future. They are teaching us not to fight force with force, but brains that actually work, and our atoms that know everything, since they were here with the first spark of the first sun. Where governments are huge and slow, we are small and fast. We're learning to pick our fights by hitting the power elite where they are weakest, repeatedly. We are learning to be one with the mosquito. This generational mission we volunteered for is a big thing with lots of moving parts. And we in the field understand that. We also know that not all progress is visible to all involved, and that this was chosen to prevent a wider galactic conflict. Still, on most days, the forces of good seem to be getting pounded down by those in power. And this also takes a toll on our operatives, perhaps more so than the planners expected. Sometimes it gets very difficult to maintain our balance down here, and at times gets even harder than that. But an individual, we understand what is at stake here, which is to say, everything. We are doing everything we can conjure. And even though we may not see the path of it right now, we are confident that the uplift mission will succeed. When we see a success like Snowden, it reaffirms our commitment. But in the meantime, can you please send in more mosquitoes? Perhaps it is fitting that I end this mission status report with a quote by one of the Uplift's most successful operatives from previous wave of volunteers. Two possibilities exist. Either we are alone in the universe, or we are not. Both are equally terrifying. Arthur C. Clarke. Big fan. So, these blood rites and these rituals, the things being done to topple the U.S. government, oh my God, don't say good riddance, though, till you study the alternatives, anarchy, or being overly, instead of, as now covertly, food for the Nephilim, reptiles, Drax, the dreaded bird, the snake. Admittedly, many of whom are more evolved than we are, even emotionally. Some of the less, what would we call the interventionist ETs of the day, tried to warn presidents. They were treated with the bad guys, but to no avail. And much more would topple the U.S. governments or create awareness of Britain and the U.S., like the blood rights in the U.S. presidents, and the Diana was not a target. You know, after they botched Diana's forced bloody abortion, botched her rigged car crash, they had to murder her while she climbed alive into an ambulance after a crash. MI6 involvement in Diana's death shocked the world, but not me. And this sounds uncannily familiar to a statement made by the CIA operative Oswald Lewinter that the true facts about the murder of Diana would shake the world to its foundations, since it involves a number of governments and more than a number of intelligence services who apparently aren't all that intelligent. How could a galaxy government, Andromeda Council, use one of many, there's many, enforce an ordinance against an interference of indigenous planetary gene pools like Earth, the prime directive, if the interloper could prove they created the bulk of the DNA they were now harvesting? No. The only possible intergalactic politics must rely on dawning awareness that interstellar predation eventually will degrade the gene pools of the culprits into the soullessness. No time travel without heavy metal, no memory through or ability to die, etc. Read Inanna Returns. And I'll read it for you one day if you like. Let me know. The Dragon Queens apologizing to us, the gene pool she helped create and abuse. The fragments of a soul group, force of Anunnaki families stuck here with their golem. Sorry guys, I forgot to turn that off. So annoying. I hate it when they call during shows, don't you? It'll stop in just a minute. It's very annoying. Okay. There. Till they help us reunite the heart of the collective. Otherwise, no one gets critical inertia, escape, velocity in the DNA magnetic, the cocooning, to get away from these cells in the DNA and the RNA, and back to the speed of light, into the soul penetration and the star penetration, and how we are really made, how our body really works. This is called being the fallen ones, the Nephilim, the real Mormon problem. You can only write magnetic field donuts onto plates of gold of immortality in the death spasms of your gene pool, forgetting how to sustain or sustainably write DNA codons or make soul. It is very notable and worthy to study, to learn how soul groups do intense reincarnation patterns together to get up the alchemical emotional cauldron, feeling the intensities to the group soul, back to the sun's gravity. The soul's journeys. Books need a sequel, with a good dose of physics, of self-organizing patterns. Field effect cocoons become solar shamans magnetic 101. How would you account for the physics to the end of Ken Carey's starseed transmissions, or all of the new physics coming out now like Kesha's, where Gaia's collective light bubble travels off migrating star systems, inseminating them with knowledge of how to turn a planet green? Why is there moss on rocks? If there was no moss on rocks, there would be no atmosphere. Remember, your gene pool's collective emotion determines whether you or your planet, star, has a nice sticky gravity emissions. Draco, vibrant reptilian habit of setting up parasitic economies as most efficient way to conquer a planet is echoed in the trading houses of Dune, in the way the Templars and Romans did it too. To see the Mongolian origins to what eventually became the Western beginning of insurance and banking is not surprising. Insurance and banking are industries which would be entirely unnecessary without fear. If we trusted each other to share, then abundance would be great, and there would be no need. Imagine a land where everyone is engaged in trying to share more, instead of measuring in order to limit how much is shared. 70% of humans would be freed from the jobs in the government and banking in order to make more abundance. Creating excessive membranes of separateness penetrates the hive cells, which make the Borgness possible. Insurance and banking under conditions of bad public relations and unsuccessful spin doctoring are called piracy and extortion. Contrary to the Western history, Templars did not invent banking nor insurance. They merely used a potentially parasitic, often interplanetary institution of their Draco Mag founders to fund the Gothic complete cathedrals. And to get a clue when the Gothic cathedral was a parasitic institution, ask yourself what they paid for a saint's relic to start one, how they collected tithing once built, when the largest navy on the planet disappeared, which we could talk about. They continued their parasiticness on the trade routes, insurance and banking, under the same Magdalene Skull and Bones logo, the pirates, the leverage, Skull and Bones Society, the CIA, gets trade routes, ultimately relies on being parasitic to drug sales. Because charging tax on access to your own psychedelics is the only source of blood for the priests. And there's psychokinesis too. We'll go into that another time. Rather gives a new spin on Marco Polo's access to the spice, doesn't it? The spice must flow. This is not all to say the Templar agenda to repair the fabric of time, to permit the angel birth, for example, is parasitic. Yet how much of the ET politics and their hidden agenda is kept away? Asking whether good or evil of a Templar, like a Mason or a Dragon Line, is generally the wrong question and a wasteful bleeding of energy. Those institutions were as much pawns of a larger earth politic that we can only ask what portions of the principles behind their often manipulative intents could still potentially self-empower our little gene pool. Step 1. Beginning to see the larger earth context of our creation and machinations. At least if we reassemble the Her Story book, fairy tales, with the true picture of fallen Nephilite race of genetic manipulators, we can piece together some themes which educate us about where we may become immortal. Out of their mostly murderous blunderings, Enlil calling himself Yahweh, probably as much visibly having reptilian scales as Noah, dragons of Eden, telling his Nerebu Hebrew clones, Gollum, they were closer in order to isolate his genetic rabbit patch, the spawn of the Nephilim. We could take the advice of any good abductee trying to relocate true genetic parents. It is the intent of the moment of conception which effectively points the winds of the sails that gathers the soul into purpose and direction. This spouting from cell to multiple cells, going on and on and on till fetus, is a nuclear reaction. As Amanda well points out, the Amun-Ra priests turned to parasitic soul-harvesting Ameneti, Gaza complex, or Amati, the abyss, to launch a new birthing souls groups into stars, corresponding with their fall from the Semo or Soma pineal igniting, to use that parasitic mushroom. It is karmatically rich and appropriate that later Dragon's kids, Germain, and the White Brotherhood would end up frozen for a time, the astral condoned or condemned to parasite life, vampire, Dracu, due to the same white gold powder addiction for external sources of fire of their ancestors. Ask yourself why did not your White Brotherhood or Alice Bailey ever tell you about the local star politics contained in your DNA, or Lawrence Gardner's Dragon line, were in some way our heroes, but their relatives need to tell us their dark side, so we learn from them both. Our goal here is to be able to define and recognize the up and the down side of the astral milkhouse. This is the original criticism of the toning chanting in the Elizabeth Clare Prophets Germain Brotherhood. Clearly, they did not succeed in creating individually self-empowered bliss ignition, but they did succeed in making astral food for hungry degenerate. Yet on the other hand, during intense kundalini or tantra or bliss, the magnetic worm of your whole astral environments are sucked into and feed you. So it becomes an age-old question, who ultimately is feeding whom here? Plants, animals, and men all must eat and nourish one another to survive. So let us eat consciously and repay the debt of our existence. Let us keep one simple example to see how we arrived at a definition of what is a parasite. When a culture, like the USSR, has to devote too high a percentage of the gross national product to fear maintenance, defense, industry, etc., it is like a human cell, stressed, needing to devote its energy to keep the immune walls up, and eventually it drowns in its own mucus and dies. The Draco designer parasites almost universally require excess mucus to survive in. Mucus is spit out during real bliss because all the self, not self barriers become transparent. Requirements are a magnetic, safe, fractal, geometric space, and hygiene. A hygiene for bliss. Twinkling eyes, lifestyles. The natural electrical raw material for most through light speed penetrating human bliss is orgasm. The politics of guilt around access to orgasmic energy to the point where they have to use a metal and make something else is perfectly priestly history. To the parasites on this planet, remember that access to empowering bliss is clearly the major gatekeeper for who gets from the parasite worm feeding to eyeball stellar worm steering. I have elsewhere reviewed Wilhelm Reich, Function of Orgasm, and even the old stuff from that crazy white-haired guy who said we all wanted to sleep with our mothers and fathers, who started talking about these things. that there would also be a bioelectrical investigation of sexuality and anxiety. Oh wait, I think we have a call. Good afternoon. Well, I don't think that worked, guys. Yes, okay, good. Anywho, I'm sorry about that. I'm not quite sure why that didn't work. If you call into the Studio A Revolution Radio number, it should. And I'll try to take you back again. The number is 347-688-2902. Okay, thank you, Robert. Thank you, guys. I'm not quite sure what happened. Okay. Anyway, we are talking about, and this is general comment, criticism, has been that most seem to completely ignore or be ignorant of the existence and their survival and information and the value of Tantra and Kundalini. And I suggest here, in orgasmic terms, that we might get new insights into the electrical difference between a parasite and a symbiote. We do not have to make a thing to do a thing. And Reich correctly observes that dramatic and often fatal diseases, as well as neurosis generally, quickly follow the failure to engage in any form of orgasm. Your passion dies, you are dying. If you cannot find your passion, you are dying slowly. But he correctly notes that this is due to a failure to be able to dissipate or distribute the electrical charge associated with orgasm. This excessive localized charge density, for example, will force premature DNA replication and cancer. And look at the electrical model of cancer as well. In his bioelectrical investigation of sexuality and anxiety, he goes on to point out the relationship of the loss of orgasm to anxiety in general, and further to note, to access what he calls satisfaction and relaxation after, specifically measuring dependent on rhythm and electrical quality of the orgasmic discharge. This is longevity. This is our kundalini. This is our free energy, and this is our path to immortality. And if we could share that with another being, there's no alien, there's no God, there is no thing we need to make, there is no magical black stone we need to buy. And to read Reich, one might assume life depends on access from your own plumbing. Because we are organic and inorganic both combined. We are minerals, we are rocks, we are everything that is around us. We are everything. So it's another example of human folly saying God. Electricians define God as the available collective self-awareness of waves. DNA as in electrical wave warming. Learning how to become self-sustaining. It's a long term for God, but still. You must have made a mistake. This God must have made a mistake when he created such high voltage and high tension and high disease potential and sexual tensions. Obviously, this view is foolish. What desperately needs to be pointed out, totally ignored by Reich, is that survival intelligence represented by orgasm or orgasmic energy or orgon, it's an electrical discharge. Thus becomes a clue to the cocooning or the worm tuning function of Tantra. It's Kundalini. A story to our moray here is that without such high voltage pressure pulled back on the slingshot, no genetic or glandular magnet would make it through light speed. And therefore gravity is the cocoon process of the solar system, a mortal situation. In other words, without such high voltage potential, properly harnessed, Tantra and Kundalini. Or you can just do yoga and just hurt yourself. Anyway, indeed, not much of any kind of biology would ever get the ensouling state through the gate of the speed of light's protective cocoon. And that's why I still think you cannot make a ship to leave the planet. You need to do something else to leave the planet. This self-aware force driving the creation of the huge magnetic ultraviolet piezoelectric worm is inside your DNA and your gland column, chakras, if you will. It's intensely conscious of the need to survive. A cell has two goals: reproduce or work on immortality. And if you are a wave worming upwards out of a cauldron of low information density, all you need to do is produce the evolving vortex, which becomes sustainable. It is immortality, and this can be created in this lifetime with your body alone. You need nothing else. This is related to permission to escape light velocity, self-embedding, perfected as a wave mechanic, which perfects gravity, implosion, compassion, self-awareness, the same golden ratio, or wave beating. The universe is only a unified field of waves and toroids, if you want to look at it just like that, made of sympathetic tornadoes and vortex, called the atomic table, which are all waves. That's all they can ever make. Your job to learn how to graduate out of this cocoon egg shell limitation called speed of light. So learn how those tornadoes become self-aware, embedded, and therefore able to squirt through the speed of light. The shape, the squirt gun, the pining away, our pineal gland, versus surviving light speed. It is the same kind of principle. Buddha said, illuminate desire. I've also heard it called charge the battery of yearning. When yearning is perfected, embedding is perfect, and intent vectors become shareable and pure and able to distribute. And turning point for human physics is to recognize and feel the relationship between feeling something outside as if it was inside. We're talking about empathy and compassion here. On the onset of recursive dimpling in the field, EKG, again, compression perfected. This is how we win. That love, it too has a shape. Any intelligent conversation on Tantra, Kundalini, or the beginning of time, travel if you will, also includes information on this. This is natural because DNA gets the will to fold, so to braid, implosively through light speed. When it knows there's a path to survival, sustainability. This is otherwise known in the term chemistry. Chemistry as in sexual attraction between people. Chemistry as in, you really get somebody and you'll sit and talk to them. The worm knows. Whether you call it cellular memory, whether you call it Akashic records, glandular intelligence, self-awareness, and DNA, what the magnetic worm knows is what is the geometry of the path to survival, in bed or die. Embed or die. You don't have to be in bed. So, artificial intelligence is recursive. And it's what they want us to no longer use, to the point that they are making artificial wombs. So that child will have no chance of this. Why would they be making and programming synthetic DNA if it was not to stop this? Suffice it to say, any oscillator, stock market volume ratios,